conversation I want to have.
Okay, now go read what he says. It's simplistic and it sounds like somebody that doesn't have much knowledge of street life. Go ahead.
Um,
You
okay, so the judge says at the onset, I want you to understand, Mr. Combs, you are not being sentenced for acquitted conduct, but under 3553, I must consider many things. Mr. Combs, you are a self-made artist who has inspired community of color. We saw the video, the free game course in the MDC. The court hopes you continue to expand it. You are devoted to your family. The court, of course, considers the collateral consequences. The court has to consider all of your history here. A history of good works can't wash away the record in this case. You abuse these women, you use that abuse to get your way, freak offs and hotel nights. The evidence of the abuse is massive. I was sitting right here during the testimony. This was subjugation. How you pronounce this word? Subjugated. SUB.
subjugation, but I'm trying to see what he's
Subjugation.
subjugating.
Yes, subjugation. That is the reality of what happened. These offenses, irreparable harm to women,
Irreparably harm two women.
irreparably harm to women who piled them with drugs. Why did it happen so long? You had the power and resources to keep it going. You were more than a John. A significant sentence is required to deter. You say you're sorry and you won't do it again after Miss Ventura's civil lawsuit was filed. Excuse me. After the video was public and investigation started, you had a brutal hotel night with Jane punched her in the head. Jane says he told her, take this pill, do out go out there and suck his dick. Fuck him. I don't care. The court is not convinced this would not happen again. The court has considered the programs. They are outweighed by the trial record in this case. Exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. The court reaches a few conclusions. 135 months would be more than necessary. A sentence over 11 years is not reasonable. Even the probation department recommends a sentence less than half of that. But 14 months time served would not be significant. Here, the data shows a wide variety of sentences. Weighing all the relevant factors, the court determines that the sentences is 50 months incarceration. Mr. Agnafilio, any recommendations where to serve the sentence? Combs' lawyer, can we get back to you on Monday now that we know there is a sentence? Judge says yes. The court imposes a fine of $500,000, including to defray the cost of improvement. There is no restitution, but there is forfeiture as reflected in the order. There is a $5,000 fine under the statute and special assessment $200. I want to speak to the strong women who came forward, Miss Ventura and Jane. You've been through trauma we can't imagine. Miss Ventura said it was force, sex, and degradation. I want to say we heard you. You weren't just speaking to the jurors, but to other victims. You stood up to power. It's not easy. Violence behind closed doors doesn't have to stay secret forever. I know you still bear trauma, but you've taught us you don't have to stay a victim. As Dr. King told us, out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. Mr. Combs, your mom writes that you have always been a good son. The same power that enabled you to hurt these women, you could use to help. Combs sitting with his hands folded, and the judge says, adjourn.
That's so much bullshit. And he's so out of touch with what goes on in reality. He's never done much criminal practice, if any at all. And he has never had any pimps and prostitutes that he has represented. Prostitutes might look like victims, but they're willing participants in something that deals with their particular form of mental sickness. Most prostitutes are not healthy up here in the mind. You were looking at the pimp game. The pimp game is a violent game, but his own entertainments and that of this entertainment industry has glorified the process of pimping. Being a pimp is about as low as you can get, about as unmasculine as you can be, and about as horrifically out of the loop of what men are supposed to be about. Be that as it may, one of the main problems you have if you represent prostitutes is getting them to get off the whole track so they can escape, because they keep going back and they keep getting caught back up in the trap. Now, I'm not looking at either of these two women that he's referring to as victims, because at least one of them became a multimillionaires. And considering what some have done in return for being hoes, that is, doing sex for money or position, they did better than most, including some we had a lot of attention paid to up until November last year. Now, that being the case, I have other reactions to it. His characterization of the parties, including the defendant, is showing to me a lack of understanding of how the game works. And all of the rest of this trying to justify what he's doing is bullshit. He can cite the codes, but Combs is represented by an attorney. He nearly made it to say he was proceeding under such and such. And in terms of the example being set, which is negative, that is endemic in this entertainment industry, what he might have cited was an effort to deter others similarly situated, which is the official language, meaning those others in the rap business and in the entertainment business who insist on this glorification of dysfunction, much to the harm of general society. He didn't even cite that. He just took this bullshit of everybody who gets caught up in this has to be a victim. And I don't like some of the things that are going on. I'm not being anti woman, but I mentioned to you the other day, let's take the OJ case. Disregard the criminal outcome, which was a not guilty verdict. What wound up happening is Rod Goldman's family and Nicole Simpson's family sued uh, O.J. Simpson civilly for damages for the homicide that occurred. Now, the statute of limitations in California on a homicide is 2 years if you want civil damages, but the present statute of limitations on a butt pinch is 25 years. Don't you think that there's a little bit of a discrepancy here in terms of severity and uniform application of the law? Yes, there is. Homicide is much more serious than a butt pinch. But for some reason, California has given an excessively long statute of limitations on a butt pinch, but only 2 years on a homicide. That bespeaks some other elements being involved in making this set of rules the righteousness and the application of the law. So
So,
it's a problem here. Women are either equal in all senses, or they are equal as entities with an equal way to equal opportunity to contribute to humanity, or well, the problem is that there are some inequalities in this between the sexes. That's why you have the yin yang principle.
so do you think the 50 months was excessive or just right?
It's longer than most people get for this offense, but then again, you could talk about the fact that he's in the public life. He didn't mention the primary consideration I would have had, which is the deterrent to others in this entertainment industry from being about spreading this wicked message.
So he got 50 months. He already served what, 14, 15 as
No, I don't understand the ruling. I'd have to read it. Was it 50 additional months on top of the 14
no,
or
no,
a total of, no, he didn't say a total, and he did not announce you will be given credit for time served. He didn't say anything like that. The way he announced it was 50 months in custody, and he didn't
he said 50
specify
months
whether
of
that was the
incarceration.
total. He didn't say whether that was the total sentence, in which case he would have been given 14 months credit, which would leave him with, well, what is it, 36 months left to go, which would be 3 years. Now, in the federal system, you do 90 some percent of your sentence. So, like if you had gotten, say, 5 years, it would be 60 months, out of which you would be in federal custody some 56 to 58 of those months. So there is no more federal parole. They abolished federal parole about 40 years ago. So it isn't there. Now, if he's got 36 months, what he effectively said was, I'm giving you this sentence so that when you take the 14 months you've got credit from, for you have 36 months, which would have been a 3 year sentence. I understand that, but I'd have to look at the paperwork to make that determination. 36 months is adequate, but maybe not, considering the aggravating factors, considering his public status. I think the whole case was garbage. The amount of money, the millions of dollars they spent on somebody getting essentially 3 years more, is ridiculous. I think that the whole purpose of it was lawfare, because it was not designed to deter crime, because there are many, many more who do this on a routine basis. They could start by going through the laundry list on Pornhub and prosecuting essentially everybody on Pornhub who has brought some actress across state or international lines to do a porn video. That would count, because that's what they did when they slightly changed this 114-year-old law. And they charged him with prostitution, but what you were looking at would have been subject to videotaping, so that would be pornography. And what they were doing was not so much essentially sex for hire behind closed doors, but they were doing it for sex shows.
Mhm.
So the original statute started off transporting females across state or international lines for, quote, illicit purposes, unquote. That illicit purposes was a term that was too ambiguous, and they wound up some decades ago modifying it into prostitution. And that is just doing sex for hire, which is the legal definition. Now, that said, there's a lot wrong with what was going on, but there was a lot more wrong with the government using lawfare to silence this man and bringing in Homeland Security under the Patriot Act so that they could get him held incommunicado. Because I think the 15 years of recordation would bring in some politicians as, shall we say, customers or viewers who would have been subject to acute embarrassment had their participation been known. Now, that's the way I look at it.
I wanna.
I said I've represented a few people who've been charged with this offense. Usually it was pimps I was representing who were bringing females from West Memphis, Arkansas to Memphis, Tennessee, or to what's now been glorified in P Valley, the series. That P stands for Pussy Valley, down here in Mississippi, where they had all these strip clubs. They would be coming from Mississippi to Tennessee to Memphis, and they would bust pimps occasionally when they wanted them to turn evidence for the government against some, say, drug dealer or motorcycle gang that was running drugs and women from one state to the other on a larger basis.
So
It's a filthy business.
yeah, I want to play the response from the lawyers after the sentencing outside the courtroom.
Out of New York City, we are hearing Diddy's attorneys speaking to the media after he was sentenced earlier today. This is live.
So yeah, we are planning to appeal. I want to hear that, bro. We are planning to appeal. We think we have strong bases to appeal. The strongest basis is that the jury reached a verdict on coercion. It found there was not coercion, and I think the judge said coercion today as a basis for a sentence at least a dozen times. We think that that is unconstitutional. We think that a jury verdict should mean more than our jury's verdict seems to mean, and so we are planning to appeal.
Absolutely. Filed a cross appeal. What would happen in that regard if they filed a cross appeal and then could Sean Diddy Combs get a higher sentence?
He would not get a higher sentence, and they're not gonna cross appeal. We're gonna appeal. We think we're right, and they'll respond to the appeal, and it'll be decided by the Second Circuit as soon as.
Tell us about the conversation you had with your client after the sentencing.
Consensual. The judge clearly thought the sexual encounters weren't consensual.
Because he's biased.
What did you make of his remarks?
He's biased.
If anyone, I'm happy to go. So we think that's just absolutely inconsistent with the jury's verdict. I mean, the jury's verdict was resoundingly clear. There was no sex trafficking. There was no racketeering. Everything was consensual. Everything was adult, which is why he was convicted only of the prostitution offense. What we feel happened today was that the judge acted as a 13th juror,
Yes,
one that we
did.
did not choose, and that he second-guessed the jury's verdict.
Well, at least the judge was open-minded. At least the judge was open-minded for both sides. He gave consideration.
Did you have a chance to talk to Sean Combs? Did you have a chance to talk to your client? Can you tell us about the conversation after the sentencing?
How was he?
How's your client?
How would this impact sex workers?
But he's okay.
You gotta push back a little.
But he's okay.
Come on, man.
Stop pushing people, y'all.
Y'all making this a circus now, bro.
Space out. He does feel justice was served, though.
How does
He said he takes accountability, and I felt like Diddy definitely took accountability for everything, sir. And I would like to just let you know that everything was not consensual, sir. Please don't say that. It was not consensual. Even Diddy admitted that.
This is garbage. This does nothing for.
Well, let me wait. Hold on for a second. Hold on for a second, because that woman that was asking him the question, she wasn't a reporter or a journalist. She was just a random person.
I know it doesn't.
One of those people with a phone trying to be in with the professional.
I know. See, what happens is the people need to understand what the law is.
She was trolling Diddy's.
I understand, but I'm not dealing with that, because the deal is the public needs to be apprised of what the law is, and the press.
Don't take what she's saying as nothing.
I'm not. Look, let me just say this: the news media, under the First Amendment, has abdicated its responsibility to keep the public informed of such things as the law and what it reasonably means. This is just garbage. First off, yeah, the government can appeal the sentence saying it isn't enough. But the reality is there is a political factor here, and this was the doing of the Biden administration to protect its heir, Kamala Harris and company, and they did not succeed. So the Trump administration is likely not to waste any further money on this, and some of the people, including the guy that was boss hog of the office when this happened, no longer has a job. So, well, that person anyway, and probably some others. But the deal is that it was a lot of money spent on what basically was a typical game that the feds pay when it's popular, and when it's not, they back off on the pimp and hoe game. It's happened over the years. So it started off with a racist basis because Congress, or man who was a senator from the state of Illinois, didn't like the idea of a colored man, Jack Johnson, with a white wife and her friend girls traipsing all over the country by train, showing this big black man with all these white women in tow. So that was why they came up with the Mann Act, is to put this Negro in his place. They got him. He was the first person prosecuted under the act. He got 1 year for it.
So can I, it's only like a minute and 30 seconds left. Can I finish?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Let's answer the question.
Yes, but he did allegedly.
All right, Queen. All right, Queen. All right, Queen.
Mark, can you talk to us about talking to Sean after
We're clearly
this?
all talking about domestic violence.
I'm
so what does
not.
that have to do with
Obviously, we spoke to Sean. I'm not going to talk about what Sean and we discussed. It's obviously a privilege.
We all
I'm not
feel
gonna get into it.
comfortable bringing
And tell us
what
what location are you going to recommend?
no matter which community it impacts.
What are the next steps?
Why weren't the sex workers on trial today?
Hold on, bro.
Where were the escorts? Stop, bro.
Thank you, guys. Here's the question. Here's what's next.
Why weren't the escorts speaking?
We're going to try and find the right facility for Mr. Combs. We're going to ask the judge to recommend that. We are very serious about pursuing an appeal. So we have a number of things all going on at the same time. I think that's all.
And you got about 14 days to start doing that?
My colleagues.
That's the essence of their case. But again, the judge is not acting as the 13th juror here. Usually the 13th juror is a concept where he acts on behalf of the defendant when the conviction is unjust. The government can appeal, but whether or not they actually do will be determined by what Bondi sends instructions to do. Now,
it's only a little bit more left.
Okay, fine. The thing is,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, guys. Great job, guys.
Sean Diddy Combs.
All right.
And by the way, you did hear people in the audience that support Combs, and they want to know when the sex workers are going to be put on trial. Traditionally, both the sexual workers and their pimps who are viewed as sexual workers are put on trial. They bust the prostitutes quite often. They bust the pimps less, but very seldom do they put pimps on trial without putting the prostitutes on trial too. So if there is a conviction for soliciting and transporting across state lines for purposes of prostitution, then why were there no prostitutes prosecuted in this case? That's a good question. And as the pimp hoe game goes, the hoes are willing participants. And I told you months ago that I was surprised that his defense team, these two guys who had the resources, didn't put on any psychological evidence about the dynamics of sadomasochism, which is a big element of the pimp hoe game. In other words, some people like pain to be inflicted on them. And if the person is getting what they want, then that puts a different dynamic than if you just pick somebody off the street and brutalize them. It's a different thing if somebody shows up over and over again to be tied up, apple stuffed in their mouth and whipped, or blindfolded and beat, or in this case, abused and keep coming back over and over for, what was it, 11 years?
So listen, one more thing with the Diddy, which I think completely went against him. And I don't know if it's true or not, but his lawyers did not object to it. Apparently, the prosecutors brought to light during the sentencing was that he had a scheduled event at some party in Miami next week. So he thought that he will be going home. The arrogance. And I think that played a part in the judge giving him 50 months. It's like, really, dog? Why would you allow yourself to be promoted at an event next week when you don't know what was going to go on? So I think he stuck it to him because of his arrogance, and wealthy people feel as though they do have a privilege, and he's been wealthy for a very long time. New money, but he's been rich for a very long time to where he's used to yes man, yes man, yes man, and getting his way. But in this situation, to literally plan an event next week, like that was a slap in the face to, I think, the judge and justice system or whatever. Just the lack of seriousness when it came to the sentencing.
The sentence was adequate.
Okay.
it's stiffer than most such sentences. What the government was asking for in a historical context, 11 years, was ridiculous. It's nowhere near the worst. I mean, I've had clients who used to go to other cities, take one or two of their whores as bait, capture some women who just wanted to party, specifically ones who were not streetwise, handcuff them to beds in cheap hotels, deliberately addict them to heroin, and get them turning tricks from the bed to which they were handcuffed, highly dependent upon heroin with no street knowledge that would have helped them to escape, and then literally abusing them until they died 3, 4, 5 weeks later. And you've got a homicide, and they don't care. They were known as guerrilla pimps.
Freedom
That,
said
that's when it starts getting bad.
Freedom says they did not object to it, and it wasn't. They did object to it. No, she says, I guess it's a she, but they did object to it, to the party event, and it wasn't an event. Okay, so then what was it? Because I'm like, yeah, the prosecutors do make up shit. But even if it wasn't a party event, he should not have said, well, even if it was to give back to the community, don't plan anything, because anything he touches or says is gonna be spent.
Well, the other thing too is they kept harping on this in this press conference on abuse and coercion.
Yeah.
The federal guidelines allow hearsay, rumor, and innuendo to be admitted into evidence in considering the sentence. Also, the standard for most aspects of the sentencing can be on a civil standard, which is not beyond a reasonable doubt, but simply more likely than not. The only time you get hit with the criminal standard is when there is something like, how many prior offenses has this person had? Then that fact, which is an objective fact subject to clarification as an absolute, that becomes subject to a reasonable doubt. In other words, like one I got reversed on, the state was claiming this guy was a career burglar, and they brought in proof of his prior criminal record relative to burglaries. Well, the state Supreme Court reversed me in part by saying they did not prove beyond a reasonable doubt their representation that this guy had 9 prior burglaries. They only proved 4, so we reduced the sentence from 15 years to 12, but we do find that the other things objected to are admissible because they are matters of opinion or weight, and they are only subject to the civils rather than the criminal standard of proof. So you have that.